Welcome to the NAFA webinar, Seek First to Understand, Financial Services and the LGBT Community. This is Brendan Burnett, Director of Professional Development and Education Programs for NAFA. This webinar is being recorded, and all questions will be answered during a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You may type your questions in the question box on the right side of your screen at any time during the webinar, and again, those will be answered during the Q&A at the end of the webinar. I would now like to introduce our facilitator, Michael Stape. Michael, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This is going to be a very informative webinar. I've had the pleasure of spending a little bit of time getting to know each of our panelists, and they are some exceptional people that I'm looking forward to introducing you to. Additionally, the NAFA Diversity and Inclusion Task Force did nominate all three of these individuals for the inaugural Diversity Champion Award last year, and so they have all gone through that process and are well deserving of the award, but unfortunately, we're only allowed to pick one person. So, first off, I want to introduce you to Jennifer Long. She is a financial representative with Integrated Financial Concepts in Fairfield, New Jersey. Following her 30-plus year military career with the Army, which included combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Jennifer turned to serving military personnel through financial services. In addition to that, she is a fierce advocate for the fair and equal treatment of transgender Americans. Give me just one moment, my slides aren't advancing. There we go. Fair and equal treatment of transgender Americans, especially those in and retired from our armed services and those living with PTSD. Jennifer also serves as the Executive Chair of Government Relations for NAFA, New Jersey. Our second panelist, Brian Haney, is founder and Vice President of the Haney Company in Silver Spring, Maryland. Coming to the financial services sector in 2007 from a banking background, his practice now centers around providing financial services to associations, including the Capital Area Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, where he formerly served as Vice President of their board. Within NAFA, he currently serves as President of NAFA Greater Washington and also works on the development of NAFA's LACP program. Michelle Mai is CEO of College Planning Source in San Diego, California. For over 13 years, her firm has helped her clients and their children prepare not only for funding their college education, but counseling them on the process of applying to colleges. She specializes in helping those apply, particularly to her alma mater, UC Santa Barbara. In addition to college planning, she and her team provide financial education and planning to LGBT couples and businesses. To start off, we're going to allow each of our speakers to share a little bit of their personal story about coming into the business and where they are today and where they came from. So to start off, Jennifer, the floor is yours. Jennifer, are you there? All right, you might be on mute. Let's go ahead and we'll move on to Brian, and we can come back to Jennifer once she's connected again. Brian,
can you hear
take
me,
it away. Yes,
can you hear me okay? Great.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. I'll make this quick. So I grew up in Washington, D.C. as a native Washingtonian, and you know, my family environment was one that really valued community and specifically really all the members of the community that you live in. Washington, D.C. is not just very diverse from a where do people come from standpoint, but it kind of covers all the elements of diversity, whether it's economic, whether it's social, racial, and so, you know, I lived in a household that paid special attention to all members of the community, including those that are, you know, on the more fringes of society or in people groups that maybe haven't been always welcomed to the table. And so when I, you know, started to develop my own personal practice, this was kind of the mentality that I wanted to have. I wanted to have a practice that was a representative slice of my community in Washington, D.C., one that was diverse, but I also wanted one that paid special attention to certain groups that may be underserved or didn't get, you know, the same kind of access. And the financial services business is the best industry to break through barriers. Money is the universal language, and everybody needs it to live a functional life. Doesn't matter who you are, who you love, what you look like, or where you're from. So, as I intentionally built out an independent practice, I paid special attention to certain diversity communities that were well represented in DC, specifically the LGBT, as well as Hispanic, among a few others. And it's been a great work in progress, one that's been very profitable and successful. So.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Michael,
Jennifer, are you with us now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead with your intro.
Okay. I just want to say hello to everyone and thanks for tuning in. Sorry about the glitch. We got that taken care of. But anyway, some general background about myself. As was indicated in my short bio there, is that I have a long military career of 30 years, mostly infantry combat experience. All the while, being transgender, I really dealt with that issue in the mid 2000s, and where it came to prevalence, where I started to, act it out. And from there, I transitioned to the latter part of my Afghan tour in Afghanistan, a medical transition, and I completed that, and which led me to, to start to really seek out a next career and where I'd be in, somewhere that would fit, a lot of the values and things that I had. And I chose a financial services career. So when I, exiting the military, I started, since having to take care of so many young veterans in their financial matters as a sergeant major, very often overseas you run into those specific issues, whereas young soldiers have financial issues back home. So I wanted to put all that to use here in, as a second career. And then again, and this is with the LGBT community, working with them very closely in various areas, whether it be legal and legal and legislative, whether it's service in the community itself, but more I have also bringing financial service to them and their unique needs and learning how to present that to them and care for them. All the different areas of that I'm involved in now, plus locally, as with the veterans as a commander of a local VFW. So I find all that together has helped me working in both communities, both the veteran community and the LGBT community itself.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for listening to me. A little bit about me. I grew up in Laguna Beach, actually. Probably the poorest kid there. But then I went to UCSB and worked in the financial aid office and learned that I really enjoyed working with people when it came to their finances and helping them in terms of being able to prepare to pay for college education. So when I finished, I got involved in financial planning, specializing in financial aid planning as well as college funding, and then that kind of dovetailed into retirement planning. What ended up happening was we worked with over 1,300 families here. We've got counselors here that help kids get into college, and over time things have become a lot more open and working with different types of kids and different types of families, including LGBT parents, kids that are LGBT, or even families that have LGBT parents. And then, over time, I really wanted to start to get involved in the community. So a friend of mine who's also an advisor, we started LGBT Financial Resources. And now we do a lot of education in terms of just working with different groups just to help with financial literacy. And so that's where we're at now. Where am I now?
Great, thank you. So in speaking with each of these three individuals, we developed a few key topics that we wanted to share with everyone, key takeaways about working in and with the LGBT community. And to get us started off on that, Brian's going to give us an overview of the paradigm shift to make an entry into this market. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. And, I think when we talk about paradigm shifts, really we're trying to examine, how do we currently think of certain marketplaces, maybe what existing assumptions we may or may not have. And then, you know, what kind of hopefully new thinking, or can we broaden our own horizon and try to think a little bit differently? And just very candidly, diversity is good for business. You know, NAIFA did a tremendous job in their 2020 study and materials that really lay out for anybody that's working in you know, high affluent markets across the United States that, you know, America is a increasingly diverse landscape, and therefore, you know, there are opportunities that abound in a lot of marketplaces, and certainly the LGBT community is one of those. And so, you know, if there's a barrier that you want to address, one of, I don't know if I can make a good business out of pursuing this marketplace, hopefully we can convince you that that's definitely a paradigm shift we can encourage you to have, that is not accurate. It's a great market to be in. There's ample opportunities, and certainly worth your consideration as a professional to find ways that you can connect well from a business standpoint. Inclusion, I think, just the mentality of, you know, when we think of inclusion, I think it everybody that just not just gets a seat at the table, but whose voice is heard, and the mentality that's helpful is, you know, that kind of, we talk about it, the title, seeking to understand these parties. You know, I think, you know, I grew up in a part of Washington, D.C. that was very affluent. I went to a private school, and, you know, I think that I had certainly a particular label that people from the outside looking in might make an assume of me. And so, you know, I understood that going into a lot of meetings, and really then just wanted to get out of my own way and really connect and understand, well, you know, clearly people are coming from different places. And it's more important that I understand where they're coming from rather than getting them to understand where I'm coming from and my thought process. And you know, if we really want to care for, you know, the clients that we work with in the LGBT marketplace, then we need to, you know, understand, I think, the things that not just make them tick at a high level, but also when it comes to making financial decisions, what barriers are going to exist that may make it challenging, that are going to be unique to them. You know, they may have experienced, you know, less than cordial relationships in the past, and we need to be aware that you know, that may be a likelihood going into it. And so it's going to be really important that, you know, we can demonstrate as professionals that we're not just going to be good at what we do professionally, but that we're going to do a good job caring for them as individuals, as people who have had, you know, a formed experience up to that stage, and hopefully one that we can then, you know, through good professional conduct, bring them to the table and build relationally from there.
Great, thanks, Brian. Michelle or Jennifer, any comments on this part about why diversity is good for business, and beyond just being inclusive, creates opportunities for us as financial professionals? All right, well, let's move on to the tips there. So let's talk next about how we can better serve clients in the LGBT markets. Brian, do you want to give a quick overview of these tips?
Yeah, and so just I think I had kind of four, and I know I'm sure that some of the other panelists will be able to build on these, but you know, good ways to connect in the community. First, work to get invited in. If we take the care approach, frankly, the way that I got connected in the LGBT marketplace in Washington, D.C. was I had a client who was in that market, and we were going to a networking event together. I knew he was going to be attending, and just strike up a conversation and said, hey, you know, what is it that you're doing that's, you know, allowing you to be successful? How are you, you know, building business and relationships? And he said, well, you know, have you ever connected with the gay chamber in DC? And I said, no, I wasn't aware there was one. He said, well, great. Why don't I invite you to the next event and make sure I can introduce you? I think it's going to be a great community for you to get involved in. And, you know, I kind of say the rest, as they say, is history. It was a great intro. So, you know, taking that same kind of approach with any clients is, you know, a great recipe for success. And then, you know, they're the ones that are able to help you develop initial relationships, usually with the right kind of people. Once you're in, you want to get to know the key influencers in the community. So definitely get to know the board members, and you know, if there's an event sponsor, get to know the person that's sponsored, understand their business, why they're doing what they're doing. But there are always leaders in a particular marketplace, and so, you know, be intentional about getting to know them, finding out what makes them tick, but approach them from a, you know, how do you benefit the community standpoint, not necessarily how you can benefit yourself standpoint. You know, when someone comes in just looking to, you know, worry about their own business, people are maybe less inclined to you know, open up or help you out. But when you come in there and say, you know, what are the challenges that we're facing in this community together? How can I help with those? You're going to get a much different response. And then I would absolutely encourage someone to, you know, serve, volunteer on a committee, get on a board, you know, join if there's a particular philanthropic initiative that the community is really coming together on, be a part of that. You know, if there's a Pride Festival or something like that, you know, find a way to participate and just, you know, be there in support of the community in general, and show that to the community members that you are committed to the community, not just committed to your own success. I think those are probably three key ways that you can build a lot of relational equity within the LHG marketplace very quickly if you're intentional about that.
Yeah, if Jennifer Long, if I may add to that. Again, as we all know, the LGBT community openly, you know, again, so openly supports brands that are, you know, that are supporting the community directly. So, you know, that's one of the things that you see indicative of the community as itself. They're very brand loyal, and they're quick to call out brands that openly discriminate against the community itself. So they're looking for people that, you know, roll up their sleeves, so to speak, and get involved in the community directly. And then you can earn that loyalty to the brands or to the marketplace in which you're in. So you have to remember, back in 2015, it was estimated that the LGBT audience had a buying power of about $830 billion. So it was a rather large, substantial market. So they can create markets as well.
Excellent.
Michelle here, and yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with both of you even more. I mean, I always lead with passion, purpose, and perspective. You know, whenever we get involved with different groups, I sit on a few different boards. I sit on the boards of organizations that I believe that I have a passion for their purpose, right? And I always give my perspective, and I'm always just trying to educate. I feel like education, at least in my business, has always been prevalent in a sense that once we start to educate people, that builds trust. When we build trust, then they're going to feel a little bit more comfortable to come and speak with us about things. So I think that's important. I think we're all connected at this point in the world, and you know, you really don't know who knows who, and just again, leading with a good passion, you know, showing your passion, your purpose, and your perspective will just automatically kind of get you introductions to other people. So I mean, when we have a group called LGBT Financial Resources, and I think this could be something that anybody can do within their own community, where we get other professionals that, you know, we believe you know, speak to the community, and we use ourselves as a resource and each other as a resource. So we have, you know, mortgage brokers, we've got other people that are in college planning, we've got people in you know, accountants and everything too. So it's a nice little network, and we all kind of chat with each other about how we can deliver education in all those different areas to the community. And then we just literally go to all these different, I think Brian said it best, ask them what they need. When you ask, they'll tell you what they believe that their groups need help with. I also do a scholarship for some different LGBT groups from College Planning Source. So that's another thing that I do too. So I mean, just the involvement, I think, is super important.
Well, let me interject a quick question for all three of you, because all three of you touched on something that I think is important for us to reinforce for our listeners. I got involved in an LGBT business association back in Seattle, and in my own experience, it took a good 3 years before I personally started receiving business from that. And all three of you have referenced the need to be committed and passionate about whatever LGBT type organization you're working about. Have you all had similar experiences of putting in the time before getting business in return?
It's Jennifer again. I would say that is true. Nothing in any market. I would have to say, if you're building in a group, people have to get comfortable with you, get to see you often, and develop the interpersonal relationships within before really business turns. So not just in the LGBT community, but also it's just about everywhere. You have to put some time in before that stuff will turn. There's no immediate return on investment just by showing up.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that as well. The one thing that I've tried to use to my advantage, not as a trick of the trade, so to speak, but really just as a kind of a heart and a mindset, is to take maximum advantage of the law of reciprocity, or what people would consider the giver's gain philosophy, where I would go in and if I was interested in doing business with a particular company or individual, my approach would just be, what is it that's going on in their life or in their business that they need help with, and how can I then be a resource? How can I support that? For a lot of people that work with private business owners, which is a respective a good slice of the LGBT market as well as any marketplace. Maybe do a little advanced logistical research about what their business, who the customers are of their businesses. Maybe some people that might be good customers, good candidates to work with them. Send them a referral before you even get to know them or something like that. So if you have a mindset about trying to be a giver first before we worried about the gains, I find that helps, and I think it also, to the point that we all made, reinforces the commitment to the community. You're there to serve the community, to see the community get better, to raise the tide for all the ships in the community to sail, which will include your own. But if you're going in, Michael, like you mentioned, I wouldn't expect immediate success in a few months or even over a year, but to always have a long-term commitment to the marketplace.
Excellent, thank you. Any comments to add to that, Michelle?
Well, I think you guys nailed it. I personally just don't go into anything trying to get something out of it. You know what I mean? I usually want to go and make relationships, and those relationships, when you actually get the opportunity to sit down with them, then you can discuss a little bit more about, how you can help them potentially if they're looking for help too. So, just the presence there, I think is extremely important, just to make sure that they know that you're there and you're committed to the community, like Brian was saying. So, yes.
That's great. Thank you very, very much. So we're going to move into a few prepared questions before we do the Q&A from the audience. And the first question, I'm going to ask it two different ways. First for Jennifer and Michelle. How was your initial experience as an LGBT person coming into the financial services industry?
Well, for me, as first entering the industry, it was, first of all, it was a major career change. Retiring from the military and then entering the private sector was a big change in and of itself. It was coupled by the fact that it was the first time I was going to be working, as a more authentic self as Jennifer Long in the market, in business. So there was a lot of adjusting on my side. However, I did work in New York City for New York Life, and I found them to be a very welcoming environment. They gave me an equal chance. So I didn't have any real industry hampering or just slowing me down from the company itself. But I did find, as a whole, my warm market, because of the transition, had a lot slower trajectory of growth than I had anticipated because of people's bias towards transgender folks. So now, after 6 years, it's finally starting to turn the tide where I'm starting to see better results.
That's good to hear. Michelle, what about you?
Well, I started in the business 13 years ago, and I got to tell you, I'm in San Diego here, probably in the most conservative area. And I didn't really kind of lead with that when I started the business, and over time I felt like I got a bit more comfortable, with experience. I started to feel more comfortable getting involved, and I think just by showing the things that I was involved with, it wasn't that I kind of led with that, but by getting involved in things, I myself felt more comfortable with it all, and was able to then get involved in trying to help other people get more comfortable being involved in the community too. So, at first I was a bit apprehensive, to be honest with you, but then once I got into it, I feel like it's the right place for me to be. I believe in everything in a lot of these organizations that help support the LGBT community. So, it makes me feel now a lot more good about myself, just because now I'm kind of come full circle where I was a little afraid before, and now I feel really great about it. So, and I think that, like I said earlier, it's all about just how you're going to help people. We're all connected, and I think, at the end of the day, more and more people are becoming comfortable about kind of working with different people from different backgrounds. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And for you, Brian, I'm going to flip this question backwards. How was your experience as a straight ally coming from financial services and entering the LGBT community? How were they receptive initially?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I probably had more of a head game for myself than was actually there, thinking that it would be a little bit more difficult, assuming there was going to be a higher level of skepticism. The community was very, open and welcoming, and they were very interested in building ally relationships with individual professionals, with corporate relationships, and so I think there wasn't as much skepticism as just there was going to be maybe well, let's see what you're all about and how you're really going to be committed to the community. And so it helped me a lot that I had clients who were bringing me into the greater community who were already members, and I think that maybe if I hadn't had that, it might have been a little bit more challenging potentially. But when you have people who you're already working with who know you not just personally but also professionally, who can then help break down some of those barriers, that was really, really beneficial. But there's, I think, a little bit to overcome as an ally, because I do think the community does want to know that you're making a commitment to the community, not just to yourself or to your business. And I think that there probably have been experiences where people who have come in as allies who did not demonstrate the same level of commitment to the community. So I can appreciate a healthy level of skepticism that may exist by some folks.
Great, thank you. Next question for all three of you. How did you learn the skills that you use in working with LGBT couples and LGBT business owners that differ from straight couples and business owners? Any volunteers to go first?
Yeah, I'll volunteer to go first. Jennifer Long. Well, as far as learning like any special skills, I think it really is listening to the group, and we touched on that a few times about actually asking questions and listening. And I think one of the biggest things is where people make missteps in, whether it be addressing gender or trying to understand a same-sex couple, is to just, if you have to, just simply ask. They'll tell you, or you can just see the cues and follow on. But it's listening, it's truly listening with an empathetic ear. Being cognizant of the needs. Remember, a family is a family. There is no special products. There's no special anything for, now that you have marriage equality, there's no real special approach to anything. They're just families. They're just individuals. It gets a little touchier when you're dealing with transgender individuals and trying to understand the gender markers, particularly when you try to apply them to life insurance, and some of the medical questions get a little more invasive. So those are the things that come in. It just really is just to be, take a step back, slow it down, listen, and clients will help you out, working the way through.
Yeah, I want to pick up on what Jennifer just mentioned, because I think the most important skill I've found that's effective, not just for the LGBT market in particular, but for probably any market, is that empathic listening, right? I go in and I think, Sandler kind of mentioned this in Sandler training for those who might be familiar with that, but take the Columbo approach. So I always try to go in just with the mentality that I don't know anything and I cannot assume anything. If I'm meeting with you, I know that I may just know that, hey, you happen to be a member of the LGBT community, but that may be all I know. And I don't want to have some preconceived notion get in the way of me actually connecting with you in a meaningful way, hearing your story, understanding how you think, how you feel, what kind of experiences you've had, what kind of challenges you've faced, not just specific to financial services, but in the DC marketplace, there's a lot of history of both good and bad for the LGBT marketplace. And I want to know, as much as I can about that, because that helps me see the framework that somebody is going to be coming from when we're talking about things in a professional capacity. And I think the other thing that is also I've learned very quickly, and I knew this about the community going in, but I had to have a heightened awareness about, there is a decent percentage of HIV positive members in the DC marketplace. And so I always have to have that in the back of my mind to be able to approach that the right way and not, of course, don't make any kind of assumptions, but also be aware that that is something specifically when you're dealing with, medical insurance and things of that nature that, you're going to want to be able to handle that, not in a cumbersome fashion.
Thanks,
Great.
Brian.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is an important one. Michelle?
Yeah. Well, I think like most people, it starts with my spouse, right? So I always ask my wife questions first. And just to get a sense of like, hey, what do you think that she's not in the financial services industry? And I'm, I think a lot of it is, we have this knowledge of different like design planning for financial, designing financial plans for people and couples. And a lot of times I have all this technical knowledge and I'm always trying to make sure that I'm still kind of keeping it real, if that makes sense. So usually I start with my wife and then I always communicate with my friends and just like, I like to bounce ideas off of others. And then of course, on the note when we're actually when I'm sitting in front of somebody, I think Brian and Jennifer were saying it, you just can't make assumptions about things. You just need to go into it, not assuming anything and just, again, be real with them. They want to know that you care and you truly care about their own interests. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I would echo what all three of our speakers have said about many, I can't speak for the entire LGBT community, but most LGBT individuals are more than willing to answer questions about who they are, what pronouns they prefer to be used, and things like that. So if you are entering this market, don't hesitate to ask because that is important to them. On that note, for our panelists, what would be one or two top pieces of advice you would give to an advisor who's thinking about making that first jump into marketing directly to the LGBT community?
I would, Jennifer Long here again. I would have to say, start local. Start, in your local community. Start where people, closely to where you live or work. I think that is important because you're embedded in that local community. It's one of the key elements that always seems to have worked for me is being involved in the local communities, particularly for me being in the New York area. Even in New Jersey, there's stuff locally and being involved at the local center. Volunteer, like for me, I volunteer at a local Pride Center, helping out individuals there, working with misplaced veterans and veterans with severe PTSD issues. Again, it's at the local level, it's at the community level, and I find if you start there first, sometimes marketing plans tend to be macro, not micro. And my advice is, I think, best served by being a micro approach first. and working in concentric circles from there out. You know, success in your local community first.
Great advice.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I agree with Jennifer. I think, you know, to pick up on that, taking that approach and then, you know, really thinking strategically about the existing influencers in that community and form relationships with those individuals, some of whom may be, you know, prospects or candidates that you would want to do business with. Others maybe just happen to be very influential in the community in general. And, you know, if you can develop a really good relationship with them where they get to know you both professionally and personally, those types of folks can be very good advocates for you to help you build kind of your own brand within the community. And I think that that's really key. You know, Jennifer mentioned that you know, the brands of major corporations and their you know, diversity, inclusion, awareness or lack thereof is very important. But I also think, you know, we as financial professionals can create an individual brand that's always going to be built on relationships, and so developing healthy relational equity in the community and in the market with influential people that are already, you know, major players is going to be really helpful and necessary if you really want to see success both in the short and long term.
Great.
Michelle
Thanks,
here.
Brian.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So, you know, I mean, I agree with everything that both of you just said. You know, whenever I do something new, I'm always trying to take an assessment of just what the landscape looks like first before I jump into this. That would be part of my advice would be, okay, identify like the organizations that are out there that work with LGBT, you know what I mean, community. And then on top of that is, are there any, I attend meetings. I mean, I just go and I'm kind of that quiet person at first before I actually start to say much, because I like to assess kind of what's going on. And then once I assess what's going on, then I can start to develop and, you know, those relationships and then ask for what sort of potential help that they might need. And once I understand that, then I start to tailor some of the, you know, the educational workshops that we develop for different organizations for those. You know, I was just trying to figure out what the need is and then fulfilling the need. But usually, you know, you don't want to just come in swinging. I would probably, you know, like I said, find out who's out, what organizations are out there, what, you know, who's, you know, involved in these organizations, and there's a little bit of the dynamics of the relationships between people before you kind of jump in there. That'd be my suggestion.
Great, thank you. There's been a couple references throughout our call today to the brand loyalty that exists within the LGBT community towards large corporations. Without naming any names, there was an example a few years ago, back when I lived in Seattle, of a large tech company up there who made a public misstep that was not viewed popularly by the LGBT community, and they paid a price for it and had some reputation repair to do. So that leads me to my next question. Without calling out any particular insurance company, and the companies that the three of you have represented or worked with, have you found any that when you first joined with them or first were working with them, that they didn't really have much of a position towards the LGBT community, and has that changed?
I'll tackle this first. I don't have any problem making it not anonymous. I had a career agency relationship with Mass Mutual for 10 years prior to us really just becoming independent and building from that. And I found their approach to the marketplace to be very good, and probably part of the reason that I was encouraged to then, you know, really continue to pursue it at a you know, at a personal practice level, because I felt like I had, you know, a major company that can back that approach and kind of put their money where their mouth is. And you know, they were serious about it in doing, you know, working with, you know, the NGLCC and helping encourage advisors to participate in things like the Mentor Protege program that the NGLCC ran. So they, you know, helped connect me for some volunteer opportunities that I was interested in and passionate about. So seeing that, and really, I think that that's probably emblematic of things that we should be looking at with the company relationships, at any level. What is, not just their equality index, which is important, but what is their business approach in terms of how will they equip somebody, either with resources, materials, et cetera, to work in the LGBT marketplace, or are they, maybe at a high level saying that they're interested in diversity, but they don't have as much resources that they can make, personal to you as a professional. Those are just things I think to be mindful of and aware of. And I also think the difference that I noticed was between just the company versus agency levels. And I think probably more of us may have different experiences with a local agency or a local company that we may be working with that may have a different business approach. And so, I took it as an opportunistic way to build that awareness at the local agency I was connected to, not just from the national perspective.
Great. Jennifer or Michelle?
Yeah, I'd have to say that what I've seen, I've working really for doing brokerage work for other companies. What I tend to find if I'm looking for literature to utilize in the market, I find it to be very thin. I can find stuff for Asian markets or Hispanic markets or whichever, much easier very often than I can find stuff geared to the LGBT community. And sometimes the literature is just being sensitive, putting a same-sex couple in the brochure versus, the traditional husband and wife. That generally I've seen across the board tends to be much thinner for a selection of material. Again, if you're marketing, you want to market to the company, and the company as a whole is looking for for the brand. If I'm just if all the material I can present has traditional a traditional family where you have husband and wife, and I'm going to a same-sex couple, two women, and the same thing, I'm approaching them, and it's like there's nothing that's that's comfortable for them to see and familiar to them. And I found that a lot of times they'll say, well, we're diverse in the market, or they're marketing to the LGBT community. However, what I've seen is it's not that they're not being friendly, they're just not gearing much of the market or the marketing materials towards them, or have an availability of them for that, to use, whether it be brokerage piece or an insurance piece, whichever. So that's what I've found in general. It's they'll be supportive as a whole. Like I've run into issues with in life insurance for transgender folks where gender markers are so critical, and being empathetic or understanding as to how someone transitions, what takes place during that time, and not in understanding the medical underwriting needing to have the right gender code at the end. But they're not providing what I see as very often materials that are LGBT friendly, so to speak.
Michelle here. Yeah, so I mean, I've been an independent, pretty much since the beginning. So, when there wasn't something that was available, and oftentimes there weren't in the past, then usually I would just call them and make a suggestion, or maybe even develop something and then have them review it and then see if I could use it. So I love marketing, so I enjoy kind of doing some of that development, and I think some companies, like when I've worked with Mass Mutual before, they were pretty receptive to some of the things that I would suggest. So it was pretty neat. I think they just, a lot of times some of these companies don't know what they don't know yet. So I do believe that if I'm in the market, that I can give them suggestions to do certain things, and in terms of marketing, and oftentimes they're just trying to figure it all out too. So any suggestions we can give, a lot of them will listen. I don't really have too many companies that I've worked with that I feel like haven't listened. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So since we've talked about inclusion as well as working with clients, how I want to twist that around in terms of your own organizations, not necessarily the insurance company on the national level, but I know that all three of you work within an agency-like structure, be it career or independent. On your office level, what has your firm or you as an owner of the firm done to be inclusive within your own work environment?
Jennifer. It's Jennifer here. For me, I work in a smaller firm, broker, a small brokerage, for a large, as a large part of a large firm, and I have to say, majority of my offices, are men, and most of them, in that 50+ age group. But I will say, from my standpoint, is they've been welcoming and inclusive since the beginning, and very respectful. And I think it really comes down to the quality of the person, whoever that may be, working in the office and making those relationships. Most people do want to try, and they do want to be inclusive. I haven't found any of that on my side where I've had any major issues, but it is for me, because it's more unique being as a transgender individual. There's more education that is necessary for most people, and you have to be willing to be receptive to questions and answers, because there are things that people genuinely want to know, so they can understand how to interact with you on a daily basis. So being open to having those conversations, that dialogue with individuals, has helped me tremendously in my business as a whole.
Yeah, I think
Brian or Michelle?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Well, for my, I think the immediate co-working environment has gotten a little smaller as our we work in a family environment, but much of our our practice infrastructure comes through partnership. So I think really we've made an intentional focus of working with the right partners, specialists that's helping us with P&C or asset management or employee benefits or whatever that is. It's been really important that we weigh out those relationships, not just on their professional capacity, but also on their commitment to working with all the markets that we find are important and valuable, and that they're able to, demonstrate that they're as committed to those same markets as we are. So I think, looking at how we operate our practice, I know diversity is just part of the rhythm of how we do business, but then we work with a lot of partnership arrangements. That's where I think we continue to try to make a very intentional, concentrated focus on our partners going to also reflect the same values and commitment to diversity that we have, and would for example, would one of our clients be as comfortable with said partner as they are with us, and just kind of having that as a measuring rod for the working relationships, and certainly as we expand and bring on some new agents or new advisors and new partners, that is something that is important for us to understand in that kind of engagement process, because it needs to be, I think, a mentality that we value, and so anything that we're associating our name with, we want those values to come with it.
Great. Michelle?
We don't have a very big office here, about 6 employees, and from very diverse backgrounds, just different ethnicities in here as well. And it's not really about, it's not really about backgrounds as much as it is about how they communicate with our clients and each other. So that isn't, I don't really focus on that when I'm hiring, in terms of, like, I just want to make sure that everyone's taken care of and we can also get along, if that makes sense. So yeah, all of our clients will be taken care of.
Right.
So yeah.
Thank you very much. So before we move to questions from the audience, just a few quick comments. If there are any advisors, there is a NAIFA member benefit available through the website. The Diversity and Inclusion Task Force is putting together resources for members, so that will continue to grow. It is available through the resources section of the website. I just want to thank, very first and foremost, our three panelists, Jennifer, Brian, and Michelle, for giving the time and putting in the work leading up to this, and it has been fantastic in my opinion. Thank you all very much. I also wanted to thank the resources chair within Diversity Inclusion Initiative, Wynn Havir, Emily Cabbage, who has been phenomenal through the whole process, and of course our trustee liaison, Cami Scott. And final thank you to our webinar extraordinaire, Brendan Burnett, who I'm going to turn it over to for final questions.
Thank you so much, Michael. And we already do have a question from one of our participants. How does life insurance address the transgender rating? And when will a company allow for rating for clients who are HIV positive? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, will NAIFA ever advocate for these changes to really embrace this community? Turn that over to our panel.
I can probably be the best one to answer especially the first half of that question. I have quite a number of transgender clients, and what I've found was working with the underwriting department, particularly here with National Life, was having them understand the process of transition. Transition is turmoil. Most people go through it. There's a lot of factors that happen, whether it's from emotional distress from the transition, the medical changes that incur, taking of hormones or any surgeries that may have taken place, but understanding where that is, and then applying the current AMA standard for gender assignment. Whereas prior, the ACLI had really advocated using the old standard, where they only would change a gender marker for an individual, whether it be male or female, if there had been a lower surgery completed for gender affirmation. So that standard now has changed. It's not, whether doctor just has to certify that you have undergone a medical transition for, which would necessitate, which would be the only thing necessary that would be needed for that gender marker change. But the underwriting department then would, had then come back and say, well, there's things that, whether if they were born male, that now they just still have, but there's differences that happen biologically that change with hormones, and understanding that changed the underwriting table. So it was a conversation that I was able to have that was influential in changing that. And to go on a second part of that statement and to say, well, when we look at that, their underwriting standards have not been, updated. And I'm an author on a bill here in New Jersey that would change some of that about what we call gender non-discrimination, and putting that forward. But there hasn't been a single piece that's been put forward to the insurance industry to actually change and modernize. However, there are companies out there that are, approaching, up on the side of the change, and understand that, and will utilize the specific gender as indicated from the insured. Which makes a big thing. It's a big deal, because that's really what it's all. Nobody wants to be like, for myself. Transition. You're now considered female in every way, except your life insurance contract that still carries an M on it. So gender markers are very sensitive items, particularly in the transgender community.
Thanks, Jennifer. Have any of the three of you had any experience underwriting clients who are HIV positive?
I have as well.
Yeah, I've had a little bit.
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, no, I'm not giving away trade secrets and saying that there's not that many carriers that are really trying to make that, significant advances in that, but there are a few now, and I think my hope is that there will be more. I think the best advice I would give to anybody is to work through, good BGAs that have a healthy diversity of carriers that also pay specific attention to something like HIV, because they can tell you, the ones that can provide, coverage and what their requirements and criteria are going to be. There just aren't that many that we've worked with, but we've done it by approaching, BGAs, whether it's, somebody like Ash or Comfort. There's a ton all throughout the marketplace. They should be good resources for you because that's their role in pulling together the pieces of information about underwriting and carriers, whether it's specific to cancer, HIV, or whatever it is. They'll be able to help you identify some potential carriers.
And being in the BGA space myself, I can confirm there are at least 2 carriers who publicly say they will underwrite HIV positive clients. Jennifer, was there something else on that?
Even in that space where I found where I've had a couple that I came across that way, but I think really the unique part too is if it's you're having the health challenges with the underwriting and onset, is to be empathetic and be ready to offer alternatives and other methods to provide coverage for them. So, because it usually takes a lot, for someone to, when they get to that point, so even in a financial meeting, you talk about issues medically, you get to that point, and then it's a very sensitive topic to begin with, to disclose that you're HIV positive. And at that point, you have to say, well, okay, let's step back here and let me see if there are any other major medical issues, and say, well, let me see what I could do in the open marketplace first for you. I said, but there are things we can do, and reassure them that you're going to work hard for them, and that there are alternatives if traditional fails.
Great. And Brendan, can you tell us again, what was the second part of that question? I think it had to do with lobbying for changes to regulations.
Yes, in terms of what NAIFA's policy will be, will NAIFA be trying to advocate for those changes?
I think that would be great. To my knowledge, and I'm not speaking on behalf of NAIFA in saying this, I will personally take it back to the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. It is certainly a topic that they should discuss.
Great, and we are almost out of time, so we have time for just one last question, which is actually a comment. The individual says, I've had similar experiences with underwriters. They treat items that they aren't as familiar with, such as the medication Truvada, negatively. Any final comments on that comment?
If the panelists don't have anything, I have had a little experience in that, but I'll leave it to the panelists first.
I haven't ran across anything particularly myself. I know that I've had to explain, all the pieces and parts, when the why behind some of the drugs, particularly when they're new, or for treatments that are new, and the status overall. But again, it's an individual case, and I particularly haven't had any direct experience in that one particular pharmaceutical.
Brian or Michelle?
I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just for our attendees, real quick, I'll just share a little bit of my experience with that medication. For those who aren't aware, Truvada, which is also called PrEP, is actually a medication to prevent the transmission of HIV for someone who does not currently have it. So it's a preventatory measure, a pre-exposure prophylaxis. And there was actually a media publicized case out of New York last fall, I believe, where a member of the medical profession who was taking it because he dealt with clients who regularly were HIV positive was adversely offered coverage for disability insurance, and took it to the New York Insurance Commissioner. And I don't think there's been a result of that investigation yet, but that is ongoing. I do think that we will probably see regulations about PrEP and Truvada coming out of states like New York or California or Florida. It will probably take some time for that to be nationwide, but that is another one. Like Jennifer said earlier, talk to your underwriters, your brokerage agencies, or whomever your resources are if you run into those clients. It can be addressed, but it has to be done so delicately. Brandon?
And with that, that's about all the time we have today. I want to thank all of our participants on the webinar today, and also want to thank our facilitator and each of our panelists for taking time today for this webinar. This concludes the NAIFA webinar.